I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers Friday, June 27th, 2025, and today we are up and over the Bigelows. You've heard me say it in the past, and I'll say it again right here. The Bigelows, some of my favorite terrain over the entire Appalachian Trail. So this is going to be an exciting episode, and we'll get a lot more into that, of course, as we get into the commentary, although we'll probably go there, honestly, in the entry. The next thing I want to do here in the intro is talk about some recent slip-ups that I've had with the distribution. Part of that is apology to you, the listeners, for a couple things that went a little less than smoothly, but then part of it's also to call your attention to it, just in case you saw these irregular things and were like, what's going on? Is everything okay? That sort of thing. So what happened, I'll be perfectly honest, what happened is that I got a little bit sloppy on some of the easiest parts of this job. So didn't fill out a couple fields right, that sort of thing, as I posted the episodes. Again, my apologies for that. I will be more careful going forward. There are two different effects that you would have gotten from that. The first one is that for Apple Podcast listeners, and I owe a big thank you to my brother-in-law, TJ, for this. TJ is a dedicated follower of the podcast. Very thankful to have TJ essentially on the team here. And he will likely be one of the first people to hear these words. So I'm glad for that as well. And I do want to, in a minute, give a bit of a shout out to both TJ and his wife, Kathy. That's coming up, but I want to kind of finish the thought that I'm on right now with the slip-ups. So TJ made me aware that the episode with Spicy and Ribbit 2 Fridays ago did not drop on that Friday. My apologies for that. That next day, Saturday night, that ended up showing up, along with 2 other episodes that were in the same state, which would have been episodes 17 and 20, which were a little while back. The one in question that I was talking about was episode 33. And then the other thing, and this is a little bit more present because I'm actually recording this right in between the time this episode accidentally aired and the time that it's supposed to air tomorrow morning, because I'm recording on Thursday. But last Friday's episode accidentally aired for a few hours on last Wednesday. And a few of you got that on last Wednesday, and then you didn't have anything new last Friday. Sorry about that. I mentioned that I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to TJ and Kathy. I also owe a thank you to TJ and Kathy in general at the very beginning, the very inception of this podcast. Because outside of my immediate family, they are the first, other than people that I met on trail, the first people that I shared the idea of doing this podcast with, and they were so super excited. They peppered me with a bunch of questions. Are you going to do it this way? Are you going to have this? Have you thought about this? All of that, but it was pure excitement, and it kind of took me from, I was at that point in sort of the beta listen. I was kind of late in the beta listen. It would be during the April visit to St. Louis that you guys heard about, and it was across a picnic table at a bar, just hanging out with myself and Carrie. We were hanging out with TJ and Kathy, and it was great, and I told them, I was like, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And again, they were very excited. And so my gratitude for that. So first, taking a step back, who they are. TJ is my wife, Carrie's brother. And then Kathy is my sister-in-law, his wife. They also are the parents of Honey Bun. You guys might remember, I mentioned them early on. Don't think I've mentioned them recently. Honey Bun and Slingshot, Kara and her husband Luke, who are also 2025 thru hikers, not on the AT, on the PCT. We'll come back to them from time to time because I did communicate with Kara from time to time while I was on the trail. But Kara is TJ and Kathy's second of 5 children. And again, shout out to TJ Kathy for my appreciation for really getting me energized to get out of beta and into, hey, we're going to go ahead and launch this thing. So thanks, guys. And today's haiku, you'll catch that the title of the entry is Transcendence because of how awesome this day on the Bigelows actually was. And so I picked one that attempts to sort of capture that. This one was written on February 10th, 2025. To be becoming, from what was to what will be, to realize fullness. And the picture that I'm looking at right here is one that I have shared recently on Instagram. So one that I've seen recently and one that I'm excited to be looking at again. This is myself, Spicy, and Ribbit. Of course, I shared that because I was announcing the recent episode where I talked to Spicy and Ribbit. So I wanted to have Spicy and Ribbit in a picture on that Instagram post. But it's Spicy, Ribbit, and me on the west peak of Bigelow Mountain. So very cool picture. It's, me in the very foreground because I'm holding the camera, of course. Spicy and Ribbit a little bit further behind me, but then you just see this majestic scene behind all three of us. And the thing that I love about the MATC lands is although I didn't catch the whole thing in this particular picture, I was more worried about the people, and that's, appropriate. But there is a sign that says where we are, the west peak of Bigelow Mountain, and the elevation. And let's see, can I read that? See if I can make my zoom a little bit bigger here. Yes, 4,150 feet on the west peak of Bigelow Mountain. So I do like those peak signs. I wish all of the trail clubs did those. With that, let's get into this entry. June 27th, 2025. Transcendence. Start, Little Bigelow Lean-To, Maine. End, Horns Pond Lean-Tos, Maine. Miles, 10.2. The picture is of Ribbit, Spicy, and me on the west peak of Bigelow Mountain in the afternoon. Starting in the morning, let's start out by calling sunrise breaking of camp the stretch goal. Still out around 6:15, having breakfasted, drank a liter of water, and with both bottles full and filtered, I'm marking that as a firm, not bad. Part of getting out of camp early was saving morning prayers for the mountaintop. Solid choice. Not quite to the peak of Little Bigelow, I saw my spot. A mountaintop rosary is always amazing, and this was no exception. Surrounded by wonder, beauty, and just sheer magnificence, I broke down and cried. This whole experience, what my life is right now, is just so awesome, it's overwhelming. As much as I pretty much had Little Bigelow to myself, the afternoon turned pretty social. At the bottom of the mountain is Safford Notch. I left the trail and made Safford Notch campsite an early lunch, as it had a water source and I was getting low. Apparently, I was not the only one with this plan. I ran into Conrad coming in as I was finishing up, and a little later I was chatting with him at the trailhead as he waited for Justin, and Ribbit and Spicy headed in to do the same. At one point, on Avery Peak, all five of us hung out, a whole crowd of 40-somethings. It was fun. At various times in the afternoon, I hiked with Conrad, or I hiked with Ribbit and Spicy, or I hiked with Justin. Conrad and Justin, though sharing a section hike, would usually be a bit apart. Just pace preference, really. As I was chilling with Conrad on Avery Peak, literally, he was telling me that Justin had done some hiking in Nepal, which sounded awesome. A little later, I caught up with Justin near the top of South Horn. I had been the last off the West Peak. The order was Little Bigelow, Avery Peak, West Peak, South Horn, with a side trail where you could get to the North Horn too, but I don't think any of us did. And talked to him a bit about it. It sounds like it was fully as great as it had sounded at first. Justin had done bits of the Himalayas, first in school, then returning there years later. It was also cool from South Horn that Justin was able to name every peak that we saw, and even talk of some that were hidden from view. He's done a lot of hiking in Maine and New Hampshire. Glad I happened to run into Justin and Conrad. Awesome guys. The views from the Bigelows, particularly from Little Bigelow and Avery Peak, but pretty much every part, were nothing short of amazing. Numerous times, I would find myself hiking a ridge looking down upon mountains, trees, and lakes, both on my left and right. It was completely majestic. I practically collapsed into the shelter. There was a lot of up and down today. This shelter actually has 2 side-by-side lean-tos. I stayed in one with Ribbit and Spicy, while Conrad and Justin went into the other one. Others would continue to join as well. Later on, I'm pretty sure I noted Justin ended up in his hammock. Most of us opted for the shelters, though, because the rain was coming. I barely beat it into camp. All right, we're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsors who help keep Muse's AT podcast on the trail. These are offerings that truly enhanced my thru-hike experience, so I'd really like you to check them out. Please look for and follow the links in the show notes to this episode. Looking forward to that lazy day on the couch, knocking down your Netflix queue and wondering what to wear? Quick answer, wear something else. Summit Ready apparel is clothing built for those who scramble over jagged rocks, reach the peaks, and actually enjoy getting caught in a torrential downpour. If you're someone who doesn't mind the elements and has the grit to crush the next segment anyway, look no further than Summit Ready to match your restless trail spirit. Check out the catalog at summitreadyapparel.com and get ready for your next adventure. That's summitreadyapparel.com. Looking for your next great trail read? Walk Uphill is a powerful story about leaving the emptiness of modern corporate life behind and finding a completely new beginning on the Appalachian Trail. It's about discovering what life can look like when you embrace freedom, lighten your load, and take it step by relentless step. I actually read this book myself during a couple rest days in Gorham, New Hampshire, right after conquering the brutal terrain of southern Maine. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover in 2 days. The book chronicles the real-life events of the author, Bounce the Hiker, in a twisty, shocking, edge-of-your-seat story that even the most imaginative fiction writer couldn't make up. Just a quick content warning, there is definitely adult material in this book, so I wouldn't recommend buying it for your 10-year-old's birthday. But if you're looking for a gripping, raw trail adventure, I highly recommend Walk Uphill by Bounce the Hiker. You can find it easily on Amazon by searching Walk Uphill Book, or just click the direct link in the show notes of this episode. All right, as I started thinking about lining up this episode, I thought that it was going to end at Horns Pond Lean-Tos, and my first reaction to that was, I can't believe we're already here. So this is Friday. I knew that it was a Saturday that I went into the Hostel of Maine, and I knew it would be the next day. So we will go into the Hostel of Maine the next day. Up and over the Bigelows seems like it can't possibly be just one day, right? And this whole stretch just seems, I actually guess I was hiking with Spicy and Ribbit for less than a week. And I have a hard time even comprehending that. So the stretch from Munson and Shaw's to the Hostel of Maine in Carabasset Valley was less than a week for me. And going through that kind of day by day, I left Shaw's on Sunday and took all of Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to get into Caratunk to go to the Sterling Inn. Sterling Inn was a nice respite on Tuesday night. And then it's Wednesday and Thursday to get to the Little Bigelow Lean-To at the base of Little Bigelow Mountain, which is the first of the mountains that I'll go into. And then, like I said, up over into and out of the Bigelows to Horns Pond Lean-To would have been that Friday. Looking back, it's just astounding to me that all of that fit into really 6 days. And that's what it is. Just feels much bigger in my head. Looking at this day in particular, like I just mentioned, Little Bigelow Lean-To, where Justin Conrad and myself all ended up on Thursday, is at the base of Little Bigelow Mountain. So Little Bigelow Mountain would be our first peak of the day. And the day is going to be largely mountain peaks. So let's see what we've got going on here. Little Bigelow Mountain is going to be about 2 miles into the day, it looks like, and an elevation of 3,025 feet. And so in those 2 miles, I would have gone up about 1,300. So not too bad, not the steepest you're going to get in Maine by any means, but that's really our first spot. And that's where I was on my own at this point. I was very intentionally on my own at this point. I left early and was trying to have a very solitary experience. And you heard it really well in the entry, and then you also heard it a little while ago. Actually, I'll go ahead and read it again from my handwritten journal here. My reflection, which largely was talking about Little Bigelow, kind of starts with the Bigelows in general, but here we go. From June 29th, so writing a couple days in the future from where we are, reflecting back on June 27th, the Bigelows were amazing. The views were otherworldly. The rosary on the top of Little Bigelow was transcendent. This was all made for me. I am so grateful and so unworthy. This is grace. And so kind of there you have it. I had this awesome moment, and I don't know in a way how else to describe it. This awesome moment on the top of Little Bigelow where I intentionally, and I didn't do this many times. Usually I would go ahead and do my morning prayers before I got anything started. But this time I intentionally delayed them for the mountaintop, and it ended up being one of the most memorable experiences on the whole trail for me. And that last line that you heard in the handwritten journal, I am so grateful and so unworthy. This is grace. I guess that's 2 lines. But I want you to hear unworthy in the right context, because that can sound negative, and it isn't meant negative when it was written. It was just like, wow, like, look at all of this. I'm so small. It's all so big. And yet, as I also wrote in there, this was all made for me. And that's not as egotistical as it sounds either. It was all, anybody in the world could say that same thing. Anybody who avails themselves of this sort of majesty anyway, this is grace. I can only sum that up with the last little bit there. This is grace. And that's that, right? So I go ahead and get down off of Little Bigelow Mountain. Obviously, I'm on a total high at this point. And then I start running into people. And that's great. So down in the Safford Notch, basically what the entry said. Talking to Conrad, running a Ribbit and Spicy as well. And then we all, at varying times, head up to Avery Peak. I remember Conrad getting there first. I feel like I was second. And the reason I remember it that way is because I was just sitting there probably 20 minutes or so, just hanging out with Conrad. And that was cool. So we were just chatting about all kinds of things. One of the things, this was the conversation, and I think that this may even be an entry on Carter Mountain in the Whites. But Conrad was telling me about these little white birds that you can get to land in your hand. Not that I tried that. My family, my immediate family anyway, is probably laughing. They know I actually have a strange fear of birds. It's even funnier when you consider that it's only little birds. I don't know. It's weird. And actually, I've largely gotten over this. I am not nearly where I was in, say, my 20s. But it's still enough that I don't want to get a little bird in my hand, which, why I'm afraid of birds, I have no idea. What happened in my childhood, that's weird. Anyway, I'm talking to Conrad. That's part of the conversation, is that, because I remember on Carter Peak, specifically remembering Conrad and this conversation. So we're just chilling there for a while. Spicy and Ribbit catch up with us. And then Justin catches up with us. And we just all continue to hang out on Avery Peak for a while. Avery Peak, I think, no, I would have been wrong. Good thing I checked. So Avery Peak was not the tallest of the 3 peaks. The West Peak actually was at the 4145 that I quoted earlier from the picture. Avery Peak was at 4088 and was also at mile 180. So just to give you an idea of the ups and downs here, from Little Bigelow Mountain at 3025, we're going to go down into Safford Notch at 2218 over the course of a little less than 3 miles. But then 2 miles later, we're going to be at Avery Peak at 4088. That's getting steep. And I know all of us were feeling that. So we took a little rest at Avery Peak. Also, it was really good fellowship as well. Avery Peak over to West Peak was actually kind of a cakewalk. It was very flat, slightly down and then slightly up. Obviously, you have to call these peaks for a reason. No more than 200 feet down, and 200 feet back up, essentially. But I guess they were only 0.7 apart as well. And then the rest of the day would end up at Horns Pond's lean-to. We come down off of the West Peak, but we don't come down. I mean, we do come down 1,000 feet, but over the course of 3 miles, it wasn't a steep down. I do remember the steep down is coming the next day, and it comes in the rain. The last bit that I want to bring into this episode, because Avery Peak, I think I telegraphed this in an earlier episode, but Avery Peak is named for none other than Myron Avery. We talked about Myron Avery a little while ago when we were talking about the different trail clubs, because Myron Avery was the founder of a number of the trail clubs, including those early ones that we talked about. Specifically, we were focusing on the MATC at the time, because that's the trail club that's maintaining the trail that we're traveling at this point in time. Well, at the top of Avery Peak, and I happen to take a picture of this, there is a plaque to Myron Avery, and of course the peak is named after him. So reading that plaque to you guys, Myron H. Avery Peak of Mount Bigelow, named in honor of Myron Halliburton Avery, 1899 to 1952, whose foresight, leadership, and diligence made possible the Appalachian Trail, this 2,000-mile footpath from Maine to Georgia. So that's awesome. It's about time that I tell you a little bit more about these guys. And in order to do that, I want to reference an exhibit that was there in Harper's Ferry when I went through. So I went through Harper's Ferry. This is sometime late September. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, which is the ATC headquarters. So one of the things you do when you go through Harper's Ferry is you go to the headquarters, you get your Polaroid, and you write down your number on your Polaroid and you stick it in their book. So one of the things that would be really cool would be sometime to go back to Harper's Ferry. And when I was there, when I was at ATC headquarters, some people were doing that. I met some people, and we'll talk about Harper's Ferry when we get there, of course, but I met some people that were going back just to look at the book of Polaroids from their year. It's kind of a really cool thing. I think my number was 72. I know that I have that recorded somewhere, so when we get to Harper's Ferry, we'll correct that if necessary. But I think I was the 72nd Sobo of the year. That seems about right. I don't know. Something like that. But anyway, the other thing in Harper's Ferry was this exhibit that I thought was the best way to talk about two gentlemen, Benton MacKaye and Myron Avery, and the beginning of the Appalachian Trail. I did not take a picture of this exhibit, but I did a little bit of research, and so I'm going to read from that research and give you guys a bit of the beginnings here. The core theme of that exhibit was called The Dreamer versus the Doer. The exhibit contrasts Benton MacKaye, the visionary regional planner, and Myron Avery, the pragmatic, relentless lawyer, as two complementary forces. Under Benton MacKaye, the dreamer, the vision, in 1921, a regional planner, Benton MacKaye, published a proposal titled An Appalachian Trail, a Project in Regional Planning. His goal, he didn't want just a hiking path. He envisioned a grand social project. It was meant as a refuge from rapid urban industrialization, a continuous corridor featuring communal camps, organic farms, and wilderness areas to help modern workers reconnect with nature. Benton MacKaye's style was he was really a philosopher at heart. He was rarely seen without his pipe, who focused on the macro level concepts rather than really the physical construction. Then you have Myron Avery, the gentleman being celebrated on Avery Peak, and he is labeled in this exhibit at Harper's Ferry, the doer. He is described as a hard-nosed admiralty lawyer from Washington, D.C. He took over the active leader of the Appalachian Trail Conference. The ATC was at that point in time called the Appalachian Trail Conference, wasn't changed to the Conservancy until I think 2005. He took over the active leadership of that conference in the late 1920s. Avery cared little for the social utopianism and focused intensely on getting a continuous 2,000-mile footway built, blazed, and mapped. His style was more relentless and pragmatic. He personally surveyed hundreds of miles of trail, pushing a measuring wheel and coordinating local volunteer clubs to dig dirt and paint white blazes. There are some quotes from both of these gentlemen that were on the display, and I want to go ahead and read this. So this is from Benton MacKaye, the dreamer. "A realm and not a trail marks the full aim of our effort. The trail is but the entrance to the final thing we seek, the thing eternal which we have called primeval influence, the opposite thing from metropolitan influence." Myron Avery, the doer. "To those who have worked on the trail, it was human soul. Its construction has involved an expenditure of physical effort far beyond the realization of those who walk over it." And here's the exhibit's concluding summary text. "Benton MacKaye and Myron Avery, one a dreamer, the other a doer, gave more of themselves to the Appalachian Trail than any other individuals. Without MacKaye's vision, the trail would have never been conceived. Without Avery's drive, it would have never been completed." And there you have it. I've been talking about bringing in a little bit of trail history. As we're here on Avery Peak in the middle of the Bigelows, that was the time to do it. It's also a really good celebration to him because, again, the Bigelows are just awesome, an awesome place. And so for him to have this peak in the middle of that to celebrate him is really very special and very appropriate. And with that, I think I will go ahead and close out this episode of the podcast. Next time, we will be coming truly down, steeply down, and in the rain. We'll be proceeding very slowly to the next major road. And we'll talk a little bit about the roads in Maine because that actually defines the sections of the trail a little bit, so that's kind of interesting. Until then, this has been Muse, and you have been listening to Muse's AT Podcast. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.
I'm here